public, our staff, councillors, and our consultants here this morning. Mr. Philip King, who's the Cultural Precinct Manager. I'd hand the floor over to you to kick things underway.
Great, thank you very much, Your Worship. Good morning, thank you very much, Your Worship, and councillors and gallery and people for attending this morning. And the purpose of this morning's workshop is to deliver the master plan. So effectively, since the beginning of this year, we started to procure these guys here from Warranamani and Bofa to develop a master plan for the Tongariro domain. And so this morning we're delivering the draft version of that master plan, and we're looking for some feedback through this morning and through the next week or so, and then eventually this time next week we'll deliver the final master plan, which is one of the options for the Civic Administration Building. At the same time as that work's going on, we're also working on developing a business case, and along with Shannon and Morne here Shannon from Warranamani and Morne Hugo from Bofa, we've also got Kent Dustin in the room who's working on our business case for us. So any questions around the business case, which is being developed at the moment, just the strategic case of the business case is being worked up into a draft format, and that's available for feedback over the next sort of couple of months, because in February we're going to come back for a further workshop and deliver this option which you're seeing today, deliver 72 Lake Terrace, which is one of the three options for the Civic Administration Building. So we're getting that looked at again to make sure that it's going to be comparable to this option to the master plan, if you like. And we've also got some work being done on the 2 Wharetoa Street car park, which is the third preferred option for the Civic Administration Building. So on the 5th of February is a date that we've got in the calendar at the moment. There'll be a further workshop where Shannon and his team will come down and deliver those three options to you. At the same time, we'll deliver the business case, which will make a recommendation, I guess, which will help you make a decision as to which of those three options becomes the option that goes into a long-term plan. So from the 5th of February, be about 3 weeks, and at that time you'll have the three options in front of you, all comparable. There'll be all the numbers. We're not delivering numbers today. We haven't done the quantity surveying on this master plan as yet, but we'll deliver that to you when we deliver those three options on the 5th of February, along with the business case. And at the same time, we're getting a bit of work done by Audit New Zealand just to make sure that all the processes are going along nicely. So that's all coming up in a couple of months' time. So today is just to deliver the master plan and to understand what that option might look like.
Okay. Thank you, Philip.
Yeah, I think that's where we're at. So I'm just going to, at this point, hand over to Shannon. And
okay, well, just remind everyone just to speak up, be good, and the councillors have got microphones on when you're speaking, and we're going live stream, correct, Lisa? So we have international listeners today, so please speak nice and loudly. Thank you very much. Councillor Boddy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for that. Have you considered the status quo? And if not, why not?
Yes, status quo will be one of the options that is looked at in the business case. So the business case will be comparing the three options to status quo. Correct.
Thank you, Philip. Okay, good morning, Shannon. Yep, that's not on. So that's it.
Okay, how's that then? Is that better? Okay. So Morna and I are going to tag team today, and I'm going to make this statement. I've just come back from the World Architecture Awards, and I'm fully inspired, and I want this project to be the most amazing thing that anyone's ever seen. So bear with me if I sound really excited, because it is an exciting project for Taupo. So what we're going to do today is, I think it is important, and you guys have the document in front of you right now, and we don't expect answers or feedback fully today, because I think it is important to take your time to read the document and understand it and digest it. But what we want to take advantage of today is both Morna and I to take you through loosely through the work we've done to date, because I think it's important to see the overall picture and then to concentrate more on the work that we've done since our last meeting about the design, the delivery of the design. So the contents will be an overarching of the entire story to date. So just a reminder to ourselves, there was 4 points, the 4Ds we call it: discover, the define, design and delivery phase. Discover was effectively looking at the site and understanding what it offered, the challenges and opportunities that presented itself. We also started to involve the community, iwi, through the define phase. What elements of the community and stakeholders in iwi were really passionate about, things that they desired and things that they didn't like. They were also involved with the design team in terms of the progress. We presented 4 options that was then proceeded into a preferred scheme to develop further. And today we'll talk further into the details around that option that was preferred. I should also note that what we're presenting right now is the business case, where there is a lot of text as well. I won't go through all the text in your own time. I think it's important to read some of the thinking that we've vocally spoke about and also through the community consultation. But it is a good summary of the work to date. So the site, the Great Lake Taupo, and the 6 pillars that we worked off as being the structure to help inform us our discussions with the community and also inform us on the structure of moving towards options and the preferred scheme. The site study work, we looked at some of the existing facilities, obviously the treasured element of Taupo, the most of the lake and its people and the harbour's edge, context and connections, and then actually looking at the site itself and being more specific about the opportunities of creating clusters within the domain site.
So the master plan document goes through the existing site. We looked at the heritage buildings, elements like the train, existing elements that are large structures on the domain, the police, the court, obviously the Great Lakes Centre and library and museum components. Existing vegetation, we've done an analysis of that, and I think the key approach there is that we want to be maintaining that existing vegetation. There might be some areas that require a little bit of work and tidy up, and there's a few septet issues on site in terms of sight lines and things, but in general the aim is to enhance green space and enhance vegetation. Just want to move on to that framework.
So the framework plan is looking from a high level. When we analyse beyond the site, it's really important to appreciate the existing town centre. I mentioned before, and I will mention over and over again about the importance of the lake and its edge, where we see the opportunity not just from within the site or from the township looking into the site, it's also looking from outside the lake, especially back in towards the site location. It's also understanding about the northern and the southern domains of what potential that actually lies as well. It's been well utilised with especially recreational facilities, but we also want to see and analyse and see the opportunity of what a cultural precinct can actually do to the northern and the southern domains.
So as part of the consultation work that Jayed Wikara from Bofamiskal led, we looked at the relationships with iwi and the site and the locations of the marae and how these fundamental relationships drive the master plan process. There's a detailed description in there about the iwi engagement process, which we've discussed in the past. But I think the key that comes out of iwi engagement is that it's an ongoing process and that we're only at the beginning of that process, and Ngāti Wharetua wants to be involved throughout, and the process is only at the beginning. Maybe Shani, you want to talk about that?
So we talked about the community process and its value. It is everything in terms of the design process. From the initial discussion and where we talked about the 6 pillars to creating a structure for discussion with workshops, with relevant stakeholders, iwi and the general community as a whole, we created, I guess, from a needs list into a defined list about what other things to the community are really important. Discover and define phase was effectively critical to how we start to frame our structure plan in terms of the master plan. So those were incorporated into the 4 options.
Yeah, again, this section really focuses on Maori design principles, and what we've done for the project is actually define a set of principles that is particular to this particular project. They're obviously based on Te Ranga Maori, and that's kind of information that's available out there, but it's been specifically tailored to the process. So this section just discusses those principles. And then this is the needs list that was developed through the community consultation process.
This slide here is pretty important. I mean, this was a big milestone for the design team when a lot of consultation through the community. There was, I think, what I call 52 pages of different views and varying views, and in some ways contradictory views about one person's opinion on how the space should be used versus another person's opinion. And this is all natural. I mean, it's subjective about every person's opinion, and experience on the site is valuable. What we try to do is encapsulate all those views together. So overarching principles were created with these points here. So landscape and sustainability obviously is an important aspect for the entire design. People, environment and place are elements which is critical for urban design and how we would shape the environment in its context. So now we move into the design phase. I won't go into details about this. We've talked a lot about the 4 options, but just reminding yourselves, all 4 options were, in our mind, valuable, important and successful, but they also demonstrated variance on the opinions and feedback from the community, and they were best encapsulated with these 4 options. Just going back to the community and engagement, from the 16 points, we then broke it down to the elements through the survey, which was online and through paper feedback, and also with the community presentations, the elements that were supportive and elements that they had concerns of. Those elements were then applied into understanding through a matrix that we originally had done and further explored upon how the feedback would categorize themselves into options A, B, C and D. And we were honest in our last presentation that it is subjective how we actually came to a conclusion of what would be recommended, but again based on the community feedback as well as the councillors' feedback as well as the design team's feedback, we came to a conclusion that option B was the preferred option to further develop that we're going to present today. So now in the delivery phase, looking at the existing plan, we have focused on just 4 areas at the moment. I mean, there's numerous locations within the site that are really important, but we have just focused at this moment for the business case 4 critical locations that we want to talk further about. The first one, if you can see on the screen, is view A, which is looking from down the township street, looking at Story Place entrance. We're not saying that this is the only entrance or the main entrance, but currently on the site a lot of people understand that this is more so the formal entrance. We want to make sure that it's understood also with the precinct plan. View B is looking from north to south. We're calling it the north to south boardwalk. So that's looking from the northern domain, looking towards the lake and foreshore edge. What you will see is an appreciation of our proposed cultural precinct in that shot. View C is looking from the bowling green location, pretty much on the edge of the foreshore, looking back towards the cultural precinct. And lastly, view D is looking within the heart of the cultural plaza and looking into the buildings and the open space and the landscaping that we've put forward.
Thank you. Just on that, I don't see the Women's Club shown on that map. You've got Rotary. The Women's Club's building's not shown, not marked.
Number 11. Oh, in terms of the label? Okay, we can correct that. So I would like to emphasise again, this is a final draft, so there's bound to be some omissions or errors or things that we've missed. So we would appreciate some feedback from the community, from the councillors on that. So apologies, we'll correct that one. So now moving to the proposed master plan. We have in this master plan seen on the right hand side left as acknowledged the existing GLC and the existing library, and look to, as part of the option B, to look at an extended foyer and address for those buildings there. The existing courthouse and the police station remain intact, including the readout area and the heritage zones. Part of option B was the preferred scheme is to look at a new museum, also an integrated civic administration building connected to it via having an atrium space that would bring a sense of cohesion and separation but connectivity within that space there. Part of the scheme is also to review the existing and to further strengthen the existing landscaping. We have looked at the southern domain and made sure that safety and natural passive surveillance has been kept intact and strengthened. We have heard very loud and clear, and the train is to be left intact and in some ways to be strengthened to be seen, also from the cultural precinct and the surrounding adjacencies as well. We also thought there's a great opportunity as well to really unlock the foreshore edge of the lake. So making sure that the buildings proposed and the new landscaping that would integrate with the existing would be strengthened. So these images I'm about to present right now are suggestive images only. They're not to say that this is the final outcome. What we try to encapsulate is some of the broad thinking and the principles that we talked about with the community, with the needs list to defined list that we've been working from. Effectively the reverse brief for this project to work upon from. So this is the view looking down from Story Place entrance, and what you see on the right hand side there is the existing library, which we are envisioning to tart up to I guess bring it to the current generation of libraries around the world, but also bringing the social and the community aspects into the library precinct as well. What you also start to see is gestures of landscaping, and also new and existing landscaping including trees as being the gateway into the cultural precinct. We don't think it's about having a flashy building to say welcome to Taupo. We actually think it's about you, the rest of the community, and actually how the landscape is to be treasured. So through paving, through landscape design, that is, I guess, the Taupo made aspect of luring you into the precinct, which will then together with buildings and landscape and the lake itself be as one. I also would like to highlight here with Tongariro Street that the focus has been is to remove cars. We do want to make sure the emphasis is on people here, and I guess we aren't kidding when we want to make sure that the improvement of having people walking along Tongariro Street, moving into this one single aspect of gateway into the cultural precinct is about people. Moving to the next shot, we have actually shown, I should note, on the right top hand side there, a legend. You can hopefully see a yellow arrow that points in the direction that we're viewing. So this is looking at the northern domain, seeing on the right hand side there the police station and looking quite closely to the museum. Again, I'd like to emphasize the focus is not on architecture. The focus is on creating the space and the type of environment what the cultural precinct will be about. A lot of focus is on some proposed new trees and landscaping, but also on the left hand side there you start to get a gesture of the new work that we would apply to the GLC and also the existing library. Similarly to that first shot, we want to make sure this entranceway is also special. But every shot that we're about to show you does offer a sense of uniqueness, because we don't want to make that every entranceway or every aspect of the site is the same. Uniformity is really important, but also diversity is really key as well. This next shot is getting closer towards the museum territory, where the southern domain in this aspect here is looked to expand within the Bowling Green area. I would also like to take this opportunity that we talked in a lot of detail last time about what would become of the Bowling Green area. We as a design team, and we've heard the feedback from the community, that the Bowling Green itself could actually work as an opportunity to actually have public space integrated with the ideas of the museum opening out. The focus on the design team has always been about the visual connectivity to the foreshore of the lake and actually seeing that aspect. At the moment it does feel privatized. It does feel like it hasn't really opened up to the public. The buildings, as well as how we destine this future space, is key to how we unlock the cultural precinct with the lake and the foreshore edge. So in saying that, in the summary, is that we want to remove obstructions, visual and permeable, and that's physical obstructions from the museum all the way to the lake edge. So physical obstructions doesn't mean removing the bowling green, but what it does mean is that we don't want to put forward barriers, and having a glass barrier is still an obstruction because you have to go round. So we want to have no limitations of allow people freely to walk through that space. We would also envision that the museum is a big investment in this location here. So seeing from within the museum and looking out, and we will consider through a later phase about how the dynamics of the museum space will be, and hopefully through the working with iwi that the Toonga will come home, and that Toonga wants to be connected with its lake as well. So having that permeability and that connection with the lake is important. So we are suggesting that any existing structures that are there at the moment, such as the clubhouse for the bowling green, be removed to maybe part of the recreational management plan somewhere else. But we're not against having recreational areas such as the bowling green within the space. The final view here is looking within the heart of the space. Again, the focus is not on architecture, but we have also indicated in the distant background there the proposed civic administration building and also the museum integrated together. You can see the push and the focus being a strong integration with the plaza space, the greening effect, and also the natural elements of building and actually landscape together. But again, focusing on the people elements and the spatial parameters of the site.
Councillor Williamson.
Just mentioned the potential, the possibility of the bowling green staying there, but functionality in terms of amenity, how would it operate without an amenity there? There's a bowling green, obviously. Would it be still in that recreation reserves, shift to somewhere else? I can't see how that would happen.
Yep.
That's a good question, John. I'll talk briefly to it, but there's more details that we will get to it shortly. But I think this slide here is probably quite important, that what we picked up from the public feedback and consultation was, and it was split. I wouldn't say it was to remove the bowling green or for it to stay, but one thing that was very clear was to make sure that all spaces were accessible to the public. So I won't re-let again about the obstructions, we've removed those. But what we do see an opportunity is that buildings to be connected with the landscape, and especially with the extension of the southern domain here. We talked about having common communal facilities within the buildings themselves, and in some ways that's probably the most important aspect of this cultural precinct, to make sure the sense of ownership of the people is with these buildings themselves and the outdoor spaces. We have started to do what we call kind of building precinct plans, which I'll shortly get to in the slide. But in terms of our mandate, we envision having community spaces within this building here, where we've got the CAB and also the museum be integrated. So we've looked at around about 700 square metres of community spaces within this element here, and also where the existing library and the GLC would be. So we can spread evenly the importance of community spaces. So we can imagine, to answer your question, John, that the clubhouses are in close proximity, close enough to the bowling green. They're not right next door, so it's not a few footsteps away. But I think it's about looking at how those flexible open spaces are not just for the bowling green or bowling club, but also for the Rotary, the Women's Club, for the Tennis Club, and other clubs that I hadn't even mentioned that are available in here. There would be close proximity to the bowling green, as well as to all the other amenities as well. So part of this, looking at the museum here, is, and it's only just one suggestion, it's not to say it's a mandate or cemented at all, but maybe a facility that could offer a gesture of seating and congregation outside the museum, where it could also be seating for the bowling green themselves. So we don't have to have bleach seating right next door to the bowling green. We could have that as well as this as well. We don't want to restrict a performance area that could happen, that could be a celebration of the arts that won't be related to the museum. So it's that way of thinking, that this flexibility, and I don't want to abuse the term flexibility because there's a lot more work to be done in terms of working with stakeholders to really rejuvenate and strengthen what these outdoor spaces will be about. But it's important that architecture and and landscape work together, and there's a lot more work that needs to be made on how that will be connected. But I think to answer your question, John, again, is that it is important in our mind about trying to make it work, but I don't think the status quo of having the club right next door to the bowling green, which is in front of the museum, is the right direction forward.
Okay. Councillor Harvey?
Yes, I'd just like to reiterate John's comments, because in all my thoughts and discussions with various people, my understanding that the bowling club is where it is and it will be staying where it is for now, and that's, I don't see why that needs to change. So I'm just a little bit confused. I'm sure we made it reasonably clear that that was not going to be in any way involved at this point. So that's how I want to see it.
So through the
I'm
chair,
very clear on that.
So through the chair, maybe I can answer that. I don't think that was what we got out of the last workshop. What we heard from you, and we might be wrong, but what we heard from you was around the government gardens type situation in Rotorua, where you had the bowling still happening in the vicinity. Now that doesn't necessarily mean a closed board fence and a club rooms like what they don't have in Rotorua. It means that the activity is still happening in that general vicinity. This is your choice though, and it's something that you can work through as you go. The thing I'd remind you of is that your current position for both the bowling club and the tennis club is actually that they leave the site. And so what this is doing is actually an opportunity for you to decide to reverse that decision. The status quo is that they're going. And that's the lease that's been given in accordance with the current policy, so the current management plan, and so this wouldn't change that, but at the completion of that date you wouldn't be extending it, which is your current position. Now, you, as Councillor Body says, you can change that, and this process you can decide to change that, but at the current time that's your position.
So I think what Shannon's suggesting, yep. So I think what Shannon's suggesting here is that the bowling greens aesthetically stay, but the club rooms or the facility of meeting after the bowls or whatever might be in a slightly different location. Yeah. So that's what we've got to understand today. Yeah, that's what we've got to decide today. Do we have a different point of view on that? Councillor Harvey, I'm sensing that you you do have it. You want that the building to stay. The Lockwood building.
See that being still utilised and enhanced in whatever way they choose to do it. Yes, I want to see it stay.
Okay. Okay.
Through the chair, I have a similar view in terms of, I know obviously with the, I get the where Shannon was coming from in terms of getting the connection with the lake and the view shafts, but I don't really see why it should be, if they, for example, I mean, if the bowling club removed all the fencing, etc., that would increase the view shaft. It's still got the building, still got the yacht club trees. Things seem a bit sort of unrealistic to have a 100% view shaft, you know, to the lake. I mean, obviously, and also given the actual the usage of that building in terms of as a recreational and sporting club. So that's, I feel that this probably is a strength, a good argument for preserving that and trying to work. I mean, even the Rose Garden with my mother, even without even declaring, I know no conflict of interest, but of nepotism. But I mean, she's still quite open about the Rose Garden being sort of protected. Well, she's even a bit more open about that. It could be moved or sort of, you know, you can replant rose gardens, although it is becoming a very, very focal point of the reserve there. So yeah, so that's just my view as well.
If I may just respond on that rose garden item. So it's our full intention to maintain the rose garden in much of its same location, but in a redesigned form. So we see that as being a component of the design to still have that incorporated.
Okay, thanks, Mornay. Any other, the bowling club, any other suggestions there? Councillor Truman?
Yeah, I suppose selecting this option was, for me, was in the view that it was going to be open space. So if that's off the table, that's not going to be open space and there's going to potentially be fences or buildings going to remain, is this the best option? Because that's a different, that's a different scenario. The option that we presented was that was an open space, and this museum was opening onto or at least visually open space. So if that's not going to be the case, then is this the best option?
So would you classify the bowling greens
If it's
without the club rooms? Is that open space?
well, yeah, because you're looking at your open space now.
Cool. Okay.
But
so
if it's going to remain sort of as it is, current setup, then to me this isn't the best option.
true.
If I may just,
Councillor Park. Sorry, Councillor Park. Would you like to come forward a little bit or something? Would you like to come forward? Sorry, come forward. We've got the speakers on.
And then maybe you couldn't hear either, but maybe you could pass the microphone down or something so that we could hear what you're actually saying. Because it's not getting reported correctly, and there's a lot of strong...
Thank you very much. All right, so Bowling Green. So anyone else views on the bowling club facilities? Councillor Keeney.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Yeah, look, my view is I wasn't overly sure when I supported that be about what would happen with the bowling club. I'm aware of our standing position around the managed exit of those of that in the tennis club. And saying that, it sort of, to my way of thinking, it doesn't make sense to move buildings away and leave the greens there. I mean, I was a bowler once upon a time at school, and the two work together. So I don't understand that. I mean, maybe removal of fences might achieve sort of opening it up, but certainly I don't get the whole take the buildings away, leave the greens there. I mean, you wouldn't have a club separated from its core purpose. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. It's a pack. You're right. Councillor Boddy.
See, we've opened up on the domain. I think we need to get down to the elephant in the room, and that's the civic building. I thought we've been told very strongly by the general public that they don't want a building on that reserve. And I think it's rather interesting at this stage, Mr. Chairman, back in the 19th of November 2013, as councillors we received a few pages on reserves, and I find it rather interesting that the function of the administration body, which is us, classify reserves according to use and purpose. That's scenic, recreational, esplanade, local purpose, community buildings, which is not civic, access way, drainage. Classification ensures that reserves are controlled, managed, developed and used for their intended purposes. Then if we have a look at the Tongariro Domain Reserve Management Plan, it actually states that the domain is predominantly Crown land vested in the Taupo District Council as a reserve under the Reserves Act 1977. Taupo District Council has the authority to manage and develop the reserve in accordance with its primary purpose, which in this case is mostly recreational, whilst the Department of Conservation ensures compliance with the Act on behalf of the Crown. Why the HELL are we still discussing option B, C or whatever, and that civic building is still there? Haven't we woken up to that? I have no problem, and I said this at a previous meeting, a reserve of significance that will bring people into our district. That's what we're after. We're not after a building that's going to be sitting idle for over 100 days a year. Why is it still in the B books that we're looking at? Let's get rid of that and then continue.
Thanks, Councillor Boddy. All right, we'll go back to our consultant, Councillor Williamson.
Yeah, through the chair. I totally disagree with Councillor Boddy. I mean, obviously, you know, you can quote the Reserve Acts, 1977 Reserve Act. In actual fact, I could be corrected, there's probably people better informed than me, but under the it's classified as local purpose reserve, and municipal buildings can be included. And up till 1998, it was the location of the Borough Council administration for about up till till the amalgamation, and for a building for a council body status for a building, it's going to be like used like minimally. I disagree. It's an opportunity for the local community, local visitors, international visitors to have a better connection with the local communities. So that's, you know, I see integrated approach to the whole development as the most relevant way and most appropriate way of doing it.
Councillor Williamson, I always say this, I certainly respect your right to be wrong.
Right, thank you very much. Councillor Park.
Can I just ask a question of the CEO or perhaps Mr. Fox with risk management? We're having a discussion about a possible option of 3 as a part of a long-term plan amendment next year. Are some of the comments of councillors perhaps predetermining their position? Like I'm very open-minded at this point. Like I'm very, like the bowling club, I'm very much not sure about that, and the rose gardens definitely need to be protected, particularly after where I was on the weekend and the feedback I got. But I'm just a bit concerned that we're having a discussion about a master plan, which is one of 3 possible options, if not, as Councillor Boddy said, status quo. So I'm just wondering if we can have some direction on that, please.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Parker. It is a valid point and one that I was going to make. That again, coming back to what Mr. King spoke about at the start, this is that start of the process. All you're doing is identifying one of what will be 4 options, because the status quo is always an option, and that will come back to you in February. The concern, and I would caution you all in terms of giving firm views now. Obviously you can give opinion about what's in front of you, but you're right, you do not want to have a predetermined idea before you go through that process. The key thing here is that what you're doing today is identifying out what your preferred option is for one part of the proposal, and that long-term plan proposal will then bring them all together.
Okay, thank you, Mr. CEO.
I take the CEO's point. All I was doing is perhaps giving a historical view of what's happened.
Cool. Okay, back to Shannon. The bowling club, right? I think we have mixed views on that, so perhaps we've got a little bit more work to do on that. My view is that I like the aesthetic nature of people relaxing and playing bowls and all that sort of thing, the green space. I do agree with you regarding the club rooms. We possibly do need some club rooms, but it is quite a dated visually looking building, but I know there are some plans to modify and things like that, so perhaps we could have some further talks with the bowling club regarding that space. So we're I think there's still mixed views, Shannon, around the table about that, so I think we might have just a bit more work to do on that, but totally agree with Councillor Truman. You know, that green shaft through there, why would we put a building there? We're going to have elongated buildings in front of it. So yes. So Councillor Park.
Just one other point is that very shortly we will be going out for consultation on the district sports and recreation facility strategy. So I also think that feedback from that will help us to make a more informed and decision, and also it'll be the due diligence that we'll be able to do through that process as well will be really helpful.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Back to you, Shannon.
Okay. Now, just jumping onto the slide of the Cultural Plaza. So we've shown you some perspectives of what the space will be like. We're now jumping back into a 2D plan view here, and hopefully it's well communicated. That you might recall from the very first meeting that we had, we talked about the Cultural Plaza space being more than just simply a square, and to offer diversity and other opportunities as well. It is a large square, and I think the key focus on our side has also been its strong address with the buildings, but also we talked about a space that would be used day and by night, and also a space that would be used in all seasons during the year. So we have looked at breaking up the plaza zone into different precincts, we're calling, within the precinct itself. So looking at the green area here, we've addressed as being potentially just like a lawn area where we could see an opportunity that maybe, and this is only a suggestion because we haven't dwelled into further details about the landscaping, that a connection with the Northern Domain that we see when large events happen in the Northern Domain. We've spoken to the GLC and they've said that they need more space. But we see an opportunity where we could be smarter with some of the space, and maybe some of that space or those events could actually happen within the cultural heart itself. So looking at a grass lawn area that may be connected with the addition or the extension to the library and the GLC, and it could be the Festival of Arts or something that work with it and starts moving into the heart. Maybe it's more paved in the centre zone. That centre zone could then also be connected with the civic administration building and also the museum itself. So I guess my point is that there is a multitude of different ideas that could start coming out of a unified space that starts to make it your own. Rather than feeling it as one space and only one use, there's a variety of different uses for the heart space. Now just moving into the ground floor plane, and this is now starting to move in a bit of an architectural language. We haven't dwelled into details about how the building function will be specifically worked through. We have received, working with, in close partnership with Taupo District Council, about the programmed areas of what they require for the museum, the civic administration building, and what they envision the future library would encase, and also hearing the views from the GLC, how they would like to improve their existing building as well. So maybe just starting with, on the right hand side, looking at the existing library, we see an opportunity that if this existing library was to be revamped, to bring it to the current generation of new thinking for libraries, and that is just not about books. It's also about the internet. It's also about social cohesion of the community within a social community building. We think also things want to be displayed. People want to display their thoughts and their literature and their arts. Highlighted in yellow there that we talked about before was an exhibition space, a foyer space, which will actually define a stronger entranceway into the existing library, but also be a gateway into the existing GLC. From the design team's perspective, when we first walked around the site, and many times actually, a sense of loss of orientation, confusion, I wouldn't go to a point of chaos, but stronger legibility is really key, needed for the GLC in the existing library. This is one solution only of how we could actually bring, through landscaping and architecture, bring a sense of uniformity into that area there. The other aspect, which we haven't shown so clearly here, is that, and it'll be through a later date, is the potential for the GLC to expand into the northern domain. At the moment there's the green room, and there's also the service dock that fronts the northern domain. We've done a lot of convention centres, and that would probably be the last thing we would want to do if we had an opportunity to redo a GLC. We are looking at new generation, so we want to make sure the outdoors are connected to the indoors of a proposed new building or revamp of a building. Now looking to the other side, towards the left hand side, we're now looking at the new proposed building of the civic administration building, the connecting atrium area highlighted in yellow, and also the single level of the museum. The museum, starting with the civic administration building, it fronts directly, as well as the museum, to the heart of the plaza space there. Actually, in all buildings, everything can be seen from the heart of the plaza, because it is your front door. We imagine the heart of this plaza being everything to the cultural precinct. The heart is deliberate because it is the beating of the cultural precinct. That strong legibility in knowing and seeing all buildings in one space. The atrium point highlighted in yellow will be easily identifiable and also be the entrance into the civic administration building. The premium space on ground floor is really important. So we imagine that giving back to the people is the focus. So we imagine food and beverage, a cafe, a place where everyone can go to, will be at the front door on ground floor of the civic administration building. Immersed within the ground floor, we also know it's important that the servicing of the civic administration building is important to get to straight away the things that you need. The other elements that are connected on ground floor is giving back to the people. So community spaces, community meeting rooms, they are all integrated at lower level there, and also bleed back out into the yellow space of the atrium exhibition area, because we don't want to define a you or an I, it's we together. So this yellow space could be, say, the art centre might decide to have an exhibition of their latest work, or someone visiting and integrating with local aspects. That canvas itself is available with the buildings as well as the outdoor amenity spaces. And within that atrium space there, we want to make sure it's very clear and connected with the museum area as well. We know it's important to identify two different uses, but it's also important to identify that we're Taupo made. So looking towards the museum area here, it'll be easily identifiable where the front door is. But it's also really important that security is really prevalent as well, that our precious taonga is coming back, but it's also visually seen from inside and also outside as well. So we imagine on ground floor there that we would have exhibition spaces, the galleries, everything, but like in some ways Te Papa is exposed at your front door. Then looking at our upper level, we've got administration, workplace, things that arguably isn't required in the most premium spaces of all. As you jump into the level there, we imagine the workplace, the office spaces, which is all needed to service and function the museum, is upper level. And that goes the same for the civic administration building as well, that the people that service the place are on the upper level, and they are the administration zones connected with the core, and they are twined together at the upper level. From the atrium position, it's also important to be able to see the engine room up above as well. So all spaces within the buildings can be seen back into the core location of the atrium space. So there's no sense of exclusiveness or segregation or discrimination. We work as one, as a unified building.
Right, so...
Sorry, Councillor Truman.
Sorry, just a question. On your page 61, just in front of the library there it says cafe, which is where the current eyesight is, and then on your page 62 it's classed as community space. So yeah, I was just wondering what's the idea on that, and also buses, like current, because if the buses are still going to go to I think wherever the buses go should be where the eyesight is. So where's the buses going to go?
Yeah, so I might answer the first one. Sorry, like I said, it's a final draft, and
sure,
we've actually made a mistake with the cafe. It is proposed at the moment to being community space, but again, further details of actually understanding how, say, a proposed new library would work with a community space, and in a way, it may not be there either. What we've realised is that we want to be smart in terms of feasibility of your existing structure. We do think that the eyesight should be in the heart of all spaces. We have looked at, and we've talked to eyesight as well, where earlier on in the defined phase, where would you like to be, without drawing anything right now, through words and me describing as a reverse brief, imagine closing your eyes, this is your cultural heart and your cultural precinct. And they instantly said, where everyone else is. So we imagine right now the potential for the eyesight to be connected to the museum, to the library, to also the CAB, and also the ground floor of that. We're suggesting at the moment that it could be connected to the atrium location. I might just jump to that slide there, highlighted, if you can see my mouse, in this location here. So it could be right on the edge of that building, so it can be seen as well. But one thing that was really important was narrative. So we know that the world is going towards an IT, internet base, but there's also the personal approach as well, that we don't want to lose that personal connection. So that personal connection is via places where people will be destined to go, because everyone will want to go towards the museum, because that's where the stories are told in every place. We think the museum is one location that is essential that the eyesight be connected to. To answer your, Councillor, your other question about the buses, which we're about to go to another slide, but I'll talk briefly to it. We talked in detail about that, and it was actually quite hard from our last meeting about how we would actually define where the buses will be. They are currently on Tongariro Street, challenging in terms of, I guess, our promise and our destination, where we want Tongariro Street to be about people and more about movement. But we understand also that people vacate the bus and they go towards, I guess, the energy of where the cultural heart will be. The cultural heart is in the centre, but the gateway into the cultural heart is in many directions. And I want to emphasise that again, that we only showed one location on Story Lane, but there's also from the Southern Domain, and we hope this project will really open up the doors along the foreshore, along the lake as well. So imagine in all corners of the site moving into it. So arguably the eyesight could be in every aspect of the site, but we think the centre is most important. Walking is probably our most important aspect of all, to be able to make sure that from the point of exit from your bus to whether it's the eyesight or to the museum or the civic administration building. It could be something that people want to admire and how it's connected with the cultural plaza space. That storytelling and moving from your bus to that destination is really important. I'm not going to go on about this. I've just come back from Amsterdam. I'm not trying to compare to Amsterdam, but I'm so inspired of how people control the space, how they've decided to be where they want to be. And I think through this consultation process with your views today and later on, and people as well, how we can actually have the movement of people and going towards a destination, because I think there's more than just simply one space. It's the direction to get to that place, and also not forgetting the existing township itself. So where we got to last time was to talk about freeing up Tongariro Street. The buses could remain on the fringe of the site, or there could be a potential to explore another option of actually, could the existing township be where the buses could be located and actually start to break up the northern and the southern bound, but also understanding that the challenges are from the exit of your bus, you want to be highly legible to where you want to go, and to make sure that the journey from that point A to B is the best we can be. So in some ways we've been deliberately on the fence, because I think there needs to be more further to consultation and to really understand the economics, the social and the community views about how the cultural precinct will work with the buses. But I would say that people first before the buses, but it is important to understand how feasibility wise and practically that needs to work.
Councillor Park.
Yes, thank you, Worship. Councillor Truman beat me to it, because I too was looking at this thinking, well, where are the buses? This is why option D to me was always on the table as well, because I believe that we should be working in collaboration with our customer services. And so with the changing face of libraries and the way eyesight's working with technology and whatnot, I would have thought that at that Tongariro Street end you would have the eyesight and library and community spaces to then help draw people down to the civic precinct, as opposed to people having to go into the precinct to find the eyesight. But again, because we know eyesight's income are anchored off ticket sales and activity sales and whatnot, but more so people are going in to use it and then going out and then booking their tickets themselves on their devices, I think that there definitely needs to be some conversations around that, because if you're in the heart of our CBD, I'd be looking to Tongariro Street and that sort of area for your eyesight, and I don't see any reason for it to change from where it is. And I would have thought, like I said, collaboration between customer services. Do you have a customer services area for the library where you can buy tickets for the GLC, where you can do all that sort of thing, as opposed to having 14 admin, 16 admin, 7 eyesight admin, sort of thing. I think that, is there a way of working smarter around that? And I too have attended eyesight conferences in the last couple.
If I might just respond in terms of our view on how this would function, is we see the eyesight as being an integrated function to all those activities like the museum, the cab. Therefore, we see that potentially as being a kiosk in that reception space. And I think the aim of what we're doing with the cultural plaza, the location of the museum cab facility, is to draw people deeper into the space. Tongariro Street becomes a pedestrianised street, so we've clearly shown that. It becomes a 2-lane street with enough car parking, but very pedestrianised, large crossings. But the aim is to draw people into the space, closer to the lake, closer to the harbour. And the eyesight is one of those opportunities to actually draw people to that space, give them the opportunity to see. We're standing in this atrium, over there's the museum, there's some displays, there's an art display going on in the community rooms, and that's a driver for pedestrian movement through the space. Now that's not to say it's the only place it can go. We also think that the other opportunity is to put it in the other atrium, which we're creating at the GLC. But what we're wanting to do is draw people into what is essentially that central zone of the cultural plaza. And the driver to do that is actually to move things like the eyesight and those activities into more clustered kind of location, rather than being on the fringe. And I think the form of it's going to change to a much smaller kiosk type of setup. The advantage of having it in a joint atrium with a cab and those things is that you do have efficiencies in staff and manning those kind of things. So that's been our driver. And we then see the space at the current eyesight space being part of the reconfigured library setup, where you then have an opportunity to have a more community-focused space, which spills out onto what is essentially shown as a plaza area wrapping around towards where the cenotaph and stuff is, and a stronger linkage to that part of the site also.
Councillor
So that's been our
Williamson.
view.
Oh, through the worship. Yes, briefly, was just along with Councillor Park's comments regarding the eyesight, plus perhaps option D was one of my quite a strong preference as well. I just want to get just talking about perhaps the devil is in the detail regarding. There's been some good commentary around about. I know this is early days in terms of even the decision not even made, but obviously with civil defence, for example, I see on you got there whether has there been any. How does that? What shape does that take? Is it a bunker? Like there's obviously has been concerns expressed around about geology and water tables, etc. Has there been any preliminary work done on that, on how that what shape that would take?
No, we haven't actually gone to details of that. Our focus has been on the master plan, but what we wanted to do was just give a sense that we've understood how the building footprints would work with the list of requirements of what the buildings are looking at the moment. We might find that civil defence is on ground floor or another part, but at the moment I think the strong indication from the council has been that it would be part of the civic administration building.
Councillor Harvey.
Yes, just to also along the lines of Anna and John Williamson's comments. Look, obviously we're going to go through all of this, but this was not my preferred option. I wanted to see D as well, because it is more of consolidation, less disruption to other areas and other buildings, and I'd like to see how that could be more put together. That's something I don't know if we can get another one of these done for option D as well, because there was quite a bit of support for that. It also involves some revitalisation of the Great Lakes Centre, the library. To me it was kind of a nice package to put it all together and revitalise the current buildings. So is there any way we can re-look at that?
Just fairness to Councillor Harvey, it was very well debated on the day, and it was passed by resolution, the option B. Show of hands, sorry, yeah, show of hands. So we've sort of been down that track, but I don't know. Yeah, we have a suggestion. What was the suggestion from the team here?
So maybe I will.
Yeah.
Regardless of what your option is, and that's totally over to you, the team need to know that, because again, what we're trying to aim for here is in February having an option to go up against those other three, the status quo and those other two sites. The work in between that last workshop and now, the team has spent considerable amount of time, effort, and therefore money coming up with this, which is obviously quite a lot further progress compared to what you had in that workshop 2 or 3 weeks ago. So we would be going back to the drawing board and having to get the team to go and redo it on that new piece of work. We could do that, but I'd say looking at the team at the other end of the room, I'd expect a variation to the contracts that would cost us more to be able to do that. And so you'd have to know what you're wanting to achieve out of that, really. Again, bearing in mind that the purpose of this is to have those options for you to decide which is your preferred option in terms of those other sites. So no, it's not. It can be done. It will cost you money, and to date, it's been based on the feedback that you gave at the last workshop.
Okay, Councillor Truman.
Yeah, just one more thing though. I think we do need to, and I don't know where it comes in, but we do need to make a decision about the bowling greens, because again, I was out of the two, but it was having that space open. If that space isn't going to be open, then I do think D's the better option as well. So I think we really need to make a decision on that. So I don't know what the process is, but we really have to have the same.
Well, can I ask the other councillors? They made the preference last time of option B, correct? By show of hands, is there any appetite to change? there appears to be the bowling club seems to be the stumbling block here. So I'd look at a suggestion the way forward. Perhaps we do a little bit more work on that. Morning.
Yeah, it's. I just wanted to take it back to kind of key principles which I spoke about in a few of our presentations, and also the current reserve management plan as I understand it. The key principle for us is that the domain, the cultural precinct, the whole area becomes an equitable space for all community to use. And as such, my recommendation has always been that all the insular sporting codes move to a different facility, off-site. The keeping of the greens as a visual thing, kind of in the sort of realms of the government gardens in Rotorua, that's an aesthetic thing and something that we don't have a major problem with having them there. But what we do from a design point of view and from a landscape architecture point of view, to me it's about creating larger open space for the whole community to use. And I think we've got to remember that. And the museum and the lake and the connection to open space, we've always shown an enlarged green space as part of the schemes, in all the schemes. And for me, having a club in that location used by a small portion of the community, fenced off, that's taking one of the major assets and the drivers of the project back to the 6 pillars, and actually negating that. So from my personal advice, and I'm not the one who makes the call on this, my feeling is that that space can be better utilised for the whole community, and it's the one space where you are connected to the harbour, you are connected to the lake. You've got opportunities to enhance Ferry Road and pedestrianise that whole street, which we've started showing. It's looking at all those edges and interfaces and lake interfaces, and at the moment the situation is that a small portion of the community is getting all the advantage out of that, and I think that's the advice that I could.
Councillor
Park. Yeah, just to clarify, when I was talking about where the eyesight is, I mean, I know those are semantics, and we're up here at this level rather than down here. I wasn't of the opinion we should flip-flop, because I don't think that's good decision making at all, and makes us look stupid, quite frankly. But I just think that we need to go forward with this, and just maybe the semantics, and it might have been my fault opening that can of worms by where the eyesight should go. So yeah, I think we need to move forward with this, but I just don't think we should hang our hat on the bowling club being there or not. I think that more work needs to be done on that, with the consultation we'll be doing on the sports and recreation strategy and whatnot. I mean, that's about the whole community helping us decide, not just a membership. And I just would hate for us to not advance on the LTP amendment because we're going to change our minds again. Like I'm at fault. I said B or D, so I had a foot in both camps. So yeah, I certainly didn't mean to open a can of worms and going back to the drawing board at all. So apologies if I gave that perception.
Okay.
Just through the
Councillor
chair,
Dollins.
I have no appetite to go and add a further option into the mix. We had an extensive debate at that workshop. We listened to the community views. It was option B. Came across as a top, and in respect to my fellow colleagues who are not here, they were in support of option B as well. It was the master planner's direction. Let's not forget we've got several options in the mix here that we're going to consider when we get to the business case study, and one of those options is the revamp of the Great Lakes Centre as another one of the options in the business case. So we haven't ruled all of that out yet. But what's good about this option is it gives people one strong concept to look at in relation to the other things that we're going to discuss. So, and I think we need to move forward, and I think it would be remiss to go backwards and confuse the process.
Okay. All right. Does anyone? Is everyone happy to move forward? I know Councillor Harvey's views, but we're happy to move forward with the bowling club just out to the side at this stage, and perhaps more conversations about the bowling club. Okay.
Okay, we agree with that process because it's a lively discussion.
Okay. All right. Where were we? What page? Landscape. 60.
All right, just looking at this this next slide. This is just really a simplified diagram just to try to explain how the key landscape spaces within this master plan function. You'll see there's a green band running between the northern and southern domain. We're calling that the green spine, and that's always been an essential thing from our very first presentation, is that we want strong linkage between the central plaza, the northern and the southern domain, and that's going back to that image of the north-south running boardwalk, which was one of those 4 images we worked up. Central to the landscape is obviously the larger plaza area, which is split into a variety of spaces, moving from softer to harder spaces. But we also looked, as part of the project, it is to look at this new atrium connecting the library and the Great Lakes Centre, and also looking at the landscape and the whole Tongariro Street upgrade, all tying together around that space. So we've shown some revamped plaza spaces running around that existing cenotaph, which is in the centre there, that circle. Obviously another key space is the play space, and I think we've used the word playground and play space sort of interchangeably. I think we're going to stick with play space, so we'll edit that. So we've notionally shown that there's a very strong connector running from the new atrium at the Great Lakes Centre down straight onto that playground shown in that location, and also the play space we see as being a multi-step play space that actually wraps around and runs right into the cultural plaza space. And in fact, I would visualize some small play elements and interactive play happening within that plaza sort of northern edge adjacent to that lawn area. So those are kind of the key landscape moves. We've shown some projects that we've worked on and visions that we've found, just notionally looking at some of the precedent imagery in terms of how these spaces would be treated from a landscape perspective, and looking at materials and so on. But again, these are just notional images. This diagram talks about the primary connections for pedestrians running through the space. The yellow arrows are key pedestrian connectors, and the key is that we build a strong connection between the town centre and the cultural plaza and the centre of the whole domain, and a strong connection to the harbour and to the river, and then obviously you can see that green spine as our core connector. But you'll notice we've also shown some connector arrows coming out of the Great Lakes Centre, and that's that discussion of how we better connect the functions within that centre's northern conference area past the green room and into the northern domain. So it's all about connecting the entire site, is what this is about. Looking at the master plan's version, the traffic and parking, obviously a key thing to this is maintaining and enhancing the number of car parks on site without overwhelming the site with parking areas. So we've got this sort of clustered approach to parking, and we've actually got a net gain of car parks on site. We also have re-looked at the whole of the pedestrianising of Tongariro Street and how that could look, and also then connectors in terms of traffic north and south and across the site, which includes a potential vehicle route running off to the western side towards the harbour, and then obviously all this is subject to final traffic modelling and so on, but these are the intentions from that.
Okay, just a moment, I think we'll have some probably questions on this. So road, so I want to take my car, I can take it right down the boat harbour, correct?
Yep.
On a secondary,
Yep.
When you say secondary, what do you mean by secondary?
Just not probably as wide a road, slow speed kind of road setup, but just we see that as probably being used less and functioning more for on the occasions that the police probably want to exit rapidly from the site. They can exit in all directions, but that's very much a pedestrianised route, so we see that as a cycle and walking connection also through to that area, and that was
it's two-way car.
Yeah,
as well.
Yeah. And it has to do a little turn at the end because of the terrain, so there's some design there, but it follows roughly the existing walkway.
So basically drive into the big tree now and go around that tree.
So the big tree is, it sits as a focal point right on our connector. It centres on the plaza and on the north-south boardwalk. So you
do a shimmy and then go down.
You do a right past the tree and then through. Yeah.
Okay.
And that shared space that you're crossing, that sort of grey hatched area, so that's a pedestrianised sense to the whole road corridor.
So you're talking about cutting off out to where the tennis club is. You won't be able to drive out on that street.
No, that street north, that blue arrow.
That's a shared cycle.
Yeah. Sorry, that arrow is actually the wrong colour. No, that road still maintains. So we followed roughly the alignment of the existing road, and we've maintained some of those existing parking areas in just a revamped format.
So there's a mistake there, isn't there?
Yeah, that arrow is the wrong colour.
Needs to go.
Yeah, so that black. Around. So that's got to be a yellow arrow that runs out there, not a blue one. Yeah.
Yeah, we've just got to make sure we get
well
that
spotted
right, because that's what people are really, really interested in, the parking and the vehicle access in and out. Yeah. Any other questions?
In fact, I think the issue there is just that label on that arrow is incorrect. That arrow is, well spotted.
Okay. Any other questions there?
Through the chair, I just
Councillor
have
Johns.
one question, and it's not actually related to the traffic and the parking, but I wonder, we talk about how the space is going to be used, and we've got an adjacent neighbour in a Crown Treaty settlement, and when we looked at some initial plans there was a hotel on there. And while I know that it's very difficult for you at the moment to accommodate or account for how that may look or feel, it is going to be a significant piece of land right next to us, so I think through this process we really need to get an understanding of how that's going to look, because you showed us some beautiful view shafts and connections, but realistically we might have a huge hotel on the corner there, so just need to understand how we might future-proof ourselves or work in with what's happening there.
So as part of our diagram and earlier models, when we came up with the options, we've always shown something there, so we've worked around that for this. So the main thing is with that link running out to the harbour, that obviously needs to be worked through with once that scheme develops. It may be, rather than a connection as shown now, that may become just a cycle and pedestrian connection, and you could possibly do a hard right turn to the south and down the back of that potential, back to Ferry Road. So there's some options there. So we've tried to future-proof that as much as we can. But there's... Yeah. I think the key with the master planning process like this is to remember that it is a stage in a design process, and it has to have some flexibility built in. So we've accepted that there might be some changes.
Cool. Okay. Thanks, Morné. Carry on. Questions? Oh, Councillor Bodie,
it's good to see on that master traffic and parking the fact we're going to link up with Spa Road in the roundabout there. That's the intention.
Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Thanks, Morné. Oh, Shannon.
Okay. So I think if there's further discussion to be had on car parking, we're happy to come back to that slide once we finish this presentation. This view here is just looking from a high level, a bird's eye view, which obviously no one would ever get unless you're a pilot or a seagull, but it does start to show you very clearly the extent and the size of the site, civic administration building, and also the museum, and also the detail, the opportunity to actually create the plaza heart space there to actually connect the existing buildings as well as the police and the courthouse and the proposed new. So importantly, we shouldn't ever forget Tongariro Street and the township right next door.
Shannon, just on that photo there, it's not showing the roads at all, is it?
Yes, it is. It's a darker paving colour.
If you go past the cultural centre, you can't go down to the boat harbour.
That's that.
Yeah.
Link there, yep.
Oh, is that? Oh, is it a little skinny one? Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
cool. Thank you.
Yep.
That's that. Okay.
So the last slide here is the metrics that we've been working closely with Taupo about what they envision at the moment, the areas for the museum, the eyesight, the community and the library and the civic administration building. Also on the right hand side here, I might zoom into it because I think it is worth talking briefly about, is car parking. So we understand the number of existing car parks is 373 car parks. We've checked 3 times and hopefully we're not mistaken, maybe we're 1 or 2 out, but that's through a physical count. And what we're proposing is 508 car parks, so approximately 135 additional car parks that we're looking at within the site. Yeah, what we haven't considered is the additional car parking that is on the edge of Ferry Road and also the outer edges of the Northern Domain. But we are looking, I think it was about 20 or 30 maybe additional, but what we also think is important is landscaping. So we haven't actually considered that. It's a buffer to make sure that trees and planting and people are connected with the car parking. So this is more of a realistic figure that we've considered with the flexibility of landscaping as well. I do really want to emphasise that, as an addition to Mornay's talk about the movement through the site. We understand car parking is important and movement of traffic. We also, and no one would ever dispute that people are really important as well. We see a harmony together, that we have to look at shared laneways. So shared laneways is about tightening up the spaces so people are aware that there is a car and there's actually a person there. Moves such as going away from asphalt to going to paved roading instantly brings a sense of calming to traffic and making people aware as well. It is a fact that when you do that, people work together better with cars. In our master plan, we've also deliberately defined car parking into lots. Rather than having car parking in every corner of your visual sight line, we've designated them to close to entranceways, but to cluster together and integrate with landscaping. But when you have a defined plaza space that might be destined for the lawn area, no cars. They're on the outer edge because we don't think children playing with cars is the right mix. We think children playing with children is the right mix, but putting cars connected on the outer edge, making sure they're safe and can be seen and integrated is the right approach. So I think from the good news point is that we feel we have answered the community's question about the additional car parking. We haven't dropped the number, we've met that. We've provided more, but we've also been quite smart about how cars integrate within the site itself.
Just through the chair, this will definitely come up, and the perception is there's a lot of council vehicles, which there's not nearly as many as people think there is, but how are you providing for fleet cars in the space?
So we haven't gone to details right now, and I think that's a further discussion with council members and Gareth and his team about how the fleet cars will be. We talked in the last presentation about a proposition that maybe 30 cars could be the accommodation that we look at, and not looking at, I mean, the current status quo right now that council staff are actually parked throughout the township and they're not designated in one spot. I guess from the design team's point of view, we think that would be a good position for this project to keep with what is in place right now and deal with this, I guess, the fleet cars within the site. But we're also aware that this will be a destination for local as well as visitors, so there might be additional cars. I think that is probably the realistic thing we should be focusing on, is that if there are additional cars, there might be someone from down the road that brings a car. We need to actually accommodate that, but over time I think that people understand that this is a people space, but right now we need to make sure we answer the needs of the community.
Very good. Councillor Kingy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, sorry, just a random question. I was just thinking about this when you were talking about sort of the harmony of people and vehicles. So just with that entranceway off Tongariro Street, sort of leading down to where the precinct would be, like, what's your thinking around police responding out of their station into that space? I'm just trying to think in my head. I'm a responder in my other roles, and I think, well, you go with the shortest path.
Yeah.
You know. So how do you balance that? Because I mean, if people are trying to get in the mood, and then you have a
so we've had some discussions around that, and the comment from the police seems to be that they weren't particularly concerned about that. They put their blue light on if they need to get out quickly, and that works fine in the shared space zone. Shared space zones work in Auckland in high traffic zones and in the CBD. So we don't potentially see an issue, but part of the reason for the link road, which is that black dotted line running to the harbour, is that would be an exit point for police, and then being able to come around, which means that they can then either exit north or south.
I think what the police have said to us is that their biggest challenge is actually current status quo, particularly during busy weekends and events. So this weekend they're an island, and so they wanted to try and find an alternative rather than the day-to-day stuff, which they were pretty comfortable with.
Right, how are we getting on?
That's it.
That's
I mean, when I say that, there is more discussion to be had. I think the points that have been raised by the councillors today are all completely valid. I tell you this, in the last 3 to 4 weeks, they have been the hot topics, what you've brought up. The bowling green has never been a finite decision, and we have deliberately left this in some ways open for consultation. But we wanted also to be honest about, from the design team's position, also working with the project advisory group, your people, as well as the community feedback. It's not as straightforward as I'm sure no one is ever envisioning that either. But we are going back to those 6 pillars and the community feedback all the time. There is no magic formula right now of a perfect master plan. But I'm not saying this either, that we should not compromise. So the focus always should be about going back to the feedback, because we have constantly done that during the last 4 weeks. Have we answered everything there? And why we broke those points down to 16 points for a reason, because those who said no to more open space, they were very small minorities for those who wanted more green space, and that prevailed in our mind. So we couldn't answer everyone's feedback because you wouldn't have a master plan today. What we took from this was that the ambition and the courage that you are today of looking at potentially this site alone, just looking at the site, what could you do for this site? And this is just one proposition that we believe as a design team that will fulfill hopefully the majority of the dreams of the community have put forward.
Okay, Philip, where to from here?
The idea from today is to incorporate the feedback that we've got and further feedback welcome from councillors, and to, by this time next week, present a final of the master plan that, like Shannon says, is still a moving piece of document that may well serve the community for the next 20 or 30 years. It's not something that's all going to happen in 2019, but in 2019 what we want to be able to do is compare this option through the business case and through a meeting right here in council for you folk to decide whether it's option Great Lakes Centre, whether the option is status quo, whether the option is 72 Lake Terrace, or whether the option is 2 Whaitoa Street car park for the Civic Administration Building. Following that process, we'll go into a long-term plan amendment, public submissions, those submissions to be considered. And so the process really from here is to grab all the feedback that we've received today.
Okay, so if councillors have some further feedback on the bowling club situation, I
Yep.
can email you.
Yep, take that into account.
Okay, cool.
Sure.
Councillor Boddy?
Just a very quick question in regards to the children's playground there. We've allowed in the 3rd year of our 10-year plan to have what they call a playground of significance. Have you done any work with the council staff that are involved with that, just to see with what you're doing may impact on our 10-year plan?
Yeah, so there's actually 2 or 3 projects that this project is working closely with. One of them is the Destination Play Space, and Tony Strange and his team are working on that, and we've been working closely with them to make sure that what we're doing and what they're doing are going to line up. The other strategy that's going on at the moment is the sport and recreation strategy, which is looking at the bowling club and the tennis club and the future of those clubs and their viability within the community and so on. And the other strategy that's going on, which we're closely linked to, is the transport strategy, which is also going on, because clearly if we're going to do some work on Tongariro Street in the future, and minimise the traffic on that and make it more pedestrianised to break down the barriers. Clearly there needs to be a place for that traffic to go. So there's 3 at least strategies that we're working really closely with.
Cool. Did I see someone else here? No? No? All good? Okay. Thank you very much, team and councillors and members of the public and staff this morning. Thank you very much. We will obviously come back to another workshop in the new year.
Yeah, 5th of February. So on the 5th of February, we'll refresh you on the master plan.
Yep.
Refresh on 72 Lake Terrace, which you saw a year or 2 ago.
Yep.
And introduce the 2 Wharetāua Street car park option.
Yeah, sure. So
feedback from the public, because we put all these submissions in, and you've taken absolutely no notice of what we said. There were 524 submissions. Apparently, 304 mentioned the option, which would mean that there were 220 people who didn't even give an option what they wanted because they were so unhappy with the thing. There were 92 votes, the option B, which works out as 17.5% of all the submissions. So what has happened to the rest? And why are you totally ignoring everything that the public is saying and carrying on as though you've got this wonderful information?
So again, just for councillors and the public, the formal submission process will be early next year. Mr. Kingitz is looking at June for the long-term plan amendment, May, June. At that point you will have a preferred option from council, but also the other options put there, and that's when a formal submission process, you'll be able to come in and present to council and present your ideas on each of the 4 options, if you like, that Mr. Kings has talked about, give your view, and then council will be making a decision from there.
What about County Avenue? Has that been
All right.
ditched?
Okay. Thank you very much. Workshop closed.